A Royal Canadian Air Force helicopter sighted Gneisenau 2 weeks ago over James Bay. They were poaching whales. Now they had come down out of Canada. We spotted the outlawed airship over Beaver Island on Lake Michigan. I gave the order. Zephyr chased the Gneisenau around the archipelago and bays of the Upper Peninsula for 2 days. We faced an even match between the airships. We lost them in the Straits of Mackinac at night and, in desperation, circled back around to the islands. The weather would change soon, making flying hazardous. In the nautical twilight of the 3rd day, the lookouts saw the Gneisenau in a cloud bank over Lake Michigan. Part of that dangerous weather. And we lost her again. Her reputation as a ghost airship remained. We continued our search into the early dawn. Gneisenau's master, Otto Dressler, is a man not to be taken lightly. He earned his wings in the Condor Legion in the late 1930s. The events in this documentary, while sensational, are accurate.
Derek Murphy's Journey in the Sky. Season 7 Episode 12, DVD Box Set Edition. Gneisenau and Zephyr. Logan House Publishing Audio presents We Were Heroes. Invasion Day. Gneisenau and Zephyr. By J.R. Logan. The sky over Lake Michigan had 3 miles of visibility. The lookouts scanned the clouds from 2 observation platforms. One fore and one aft on the upper envelope of the Zephyr. Up here, the vibration of the engines faded with the padding of the helium gas cells. The wind picked up from the northwest. Cloud cover complicated the search. The air blew cold and thin at 20,000 feet. The crew on lookout had to communicate through hand-waving. They rotated every 20 minutes. Derek Murphy left the lookouts to their work as he climbed down the ladder into the airship. He felt all his 5 decades after 2 days without sleep. The platforms had a straight ladder down to the gondola. He took one rung at a time. Deeper in the ship, the engines hummed and the air pump's pulse vibrated in the gas cells. He could feel the cycling pressure in the thin cell wall against his back. Dropping into the gondola, Murphy found the idle crew waiting. 20 men watched Murphy. They waited for orders. They wore the high-vis yellow and silver jackets and stocking caps of the Zephyr. Murphy looked at each in turn. Everyone was armed with shotguns, the film crew, the airmen, and the flight mechanics. It felt unnatural. He moved through the crowded passage to the wardroom. Dobbs stood at the radio set and Montgomery chains smoked. They waved to Murphy. Clara Dobbs was a short blonde film producer. Daddy's money funded the Zephyr's documentary expeditions. She talked on the radio phone with the Great Lakes Hero Association. "We're on our own," Dobbs said, hanging up the radio phone. Murphy took off the heavy coat and hat. His face was burned a light brown from years in the tropical sun. Dobbs took the cigarette from Montgomery's mouth to take a long drag. "Great Lakes won't help?" Murphy said. "They can't get to the islands. None of them fly. Best they can do is notify the field offices to keep an eye out. The National Squad is in the northeast as usual. And the Coast Guard won't go near Gneisenau," Dobbs said. "They've lost too many helicopters." "I don't blame them," Murphy said. Jacob Montgomery, a lanky, frail man, joined the conversation. He was the Zephyr's ace engineer, the super scientist that kept them in the air. "The crew's ready to go. But Skipper, shouldn't we call in an Air National Guard unit if we find them?" Montgomery said. And he pulled the cigarette back from Dobbs. "Putting Gneisenau to the bottom is tempting. But Dressler needs to answer for war crimes, the organ trafficking, and illegal whaling. Hell, the experiments we discovered in the Congo last year. That alone should have turned the world against him," Murphy said. "He has to have 3-letter agency connections. Why else would this guy still be around?" Dobbs said. "Sometimes there's justice. Sometimes, just us. I'll be on the bridge," Murphy said.
I didn't feel good about this. It was crossing the line. International hero license or not. To take on Gneisenau meant going to war. 3 of the Zephyr's crew were baselines, and 2 more were former super soldiers. They had some invulnerability and army training. The rest were like Montgomery, not bulletproof and not soldiers. Losing lives today was the only thing I could be sure about. Dressler needed to be taken down. I had walked away or found excuses in the past many times, to not act.
Otto Dressler watched the radar display. It passively listened for signals. The Gneisenau was a catamaran Zeppelin. The double envelope contained nearly 3 million cubic feet of hydrogen. It had most of the internals made of radar-absorbent carbon fiber. A radar signal was more of a warning to Gneisenau than a threat. The airship lingered in the clouds, keeping pace with the wind. In the clouds, they stayed hidden. Dressler was a ginger and gray-haired man with green eyes. The primary clone that had been active for 30 years. The original Otto Dressler had passed long ago. The work continued. He wore a turtleneck sweater and a white captain's hat. Cut in a German style, the gold braids and wreath of the cap had dulled over time. At the helm was a woman, Soledad Felix Uicaro. A tall feline human, she had long, brown hair spotted with a blonde tortoiseshell pattern. Unlike the other catgirls that made up the crew, she wore a black chauffeur's uniform. "Try and keep us steady with the clouds, the sun is up," Dressler said. "Yes, sir," Soledad said. 3 clones of Tabitha Grund and the primary clone of Jacqueline St. Clair waited nearby. All 4 women wore German Empire airship uniforms. A black sailor top and pants with white trim. The crewmen's caps had holes cut for their ears. The tally ribbon that wrapped the headband in gold letters said, Gneisenau. The 2 girls were opposites. Tabitha was short, stocky, and prone to be heavy, with brown and white hair split over her head in a calico pattern. Jacqueline was tall and lean with a head of long radiant golden hair. Tabitha rarely spoke. Jacqueline couldn't keep quiet for long. "Otto, how long are we going to run from these guys?" Jacqueline said. "Not much longer. We will run out of clouds sooner or later," Dressler said. "Murphy's never going to give up. Just like on the TV show. He keeps going regardless," Jacqueline said. Tabitha nodded in agreement. She had the first 5 seasons on DVD. "I know, but I hoped we'd get away. The crew are new clones. It would be a waste to start over." Dressler said. "I'm liking this one," Jacqueline said with a bounce. "Next time you'll talk less," Dressler said. "Ah," Jacqueline said. "Go wake the woman up." "I have work for her," Dressler said. "The sun's up. She's not going to be happy," Jacqueline said, walking to the door. "She will not be happy if her coffin is at the bottom of Lake Michigan," Dressler said. He waved Jacqueline to go. A 4th Tabitha tapped on the coffin lid. There was a shuffling sound from inside. "I'm almost dressed," a woman said from inside the coffin. The voice had a brogue accent. The coffin lid opened, and Tabitha reached to help. The woman climbed out of the black silk-lined coffin. She was a willowy woman. A red leather flight suit with long leather gloves covered her body. A mask protected her face with smoked glass goggles over her eyes. She pointed to the window. The muffled voice said something under the mask. Jacqueline pulled open the blackout blinds, and a sunbeam through the clouds lit the room. The Irish vampire, Veronica Flanagan, stood in the morning light. No skin exposed. She looked at her hands, waiting for smoke or flames, but the leather did its job. "Sweet," Jacqueline said. The vampire and 2 catgirls walked to the bridge, where Dressler and Soledad looked over a map. He smiled to see Veronica in the daylight. "Labeling, when we get close to the Zephyr, cause some chaos." "Not too much," Dressler said. He handed Tabitha a gun belt with an artillery Luger. The belt went around Veronica's waist. She tapped her watch. "Give me 10 minutes, Dressler said. Veronica nodded in agreement. Her body started to warp and twist, to grow smaller. Her arms bent back, and the leather suit changed to feathers. The face mask molded into a beak. Soon a black raven stood on the deck. Tabitha opened a window. With a hop and flutter of wings, the raven took to the air. "You're up, Tabitha." "Soledad ramming speed," Dressler said.
The first indication of something wrong was the wailing harpoon that slammed into the gondola.
The Zephyr shuddered as the harpoon and the trailing cable punched through the carbon fiber hull. The barbs opened deep in the airship to lock the harpoon in place. Murphy ran down the passage as the crew scattered fore and aft. The engineering crew surged back for damage control. As the angle changed, the cable tightened and ripped the gondola's struts apart. Then the cable went slack. "Brace!" Murphy yelled. The Gneisenau crashed out of the clouds. Zephyr started to turn away. Gneisenau turned to sideswipe the Zephyr. The envelopes of the Zeppelins scraped and twisted their frames into each other. The cable pulled tight to lock Zephyr to the Gneisenau, rolling both ships into each other. Montgomery came to the cable with the baseline crew members and a fire axe to hack it away. But braided steel ran the last 50 feet of the cable. The hull creaked. The two Zeppelins hung in the air with the wind blowing through the hole in Zephyr's side. Murphy ran up to the next level above the gondola to find the hulls twisted into each other. He could see a passage into Gneisenau.
I knew it was a trap. After 2 days with almost no sleep, I was at fuck it. We boarded the Gneisenau.
The boarding party rushed forward, led by the military veterans of the crew. Murphy got pushed to the back while they jumped decks. As Murphy took a step over, the cable released. He staggered onto the Gneisenau's deck as the hulls separated with a jerk. A square of Gneisenau's carbon fiber hull ripped off. Gas cells exposed. Pieces of both airships fell into the lake below. 10 men had crossed over with Murphy. They watched the Zephyr drop away as Gneisenau gained altitude. Dobbs looked out the window as the Gneisenau climbed up above them. She turned the ship's wheel to escape the falling debris. Dobbs didn't notice the Raven land on the window ledge. She set the lock on the wheel and pulled the UHF radio from her belt. "Murphy?" Dobbs said, holding the radio and looking out the window. Veronica pistol whipped Dobbs across the back of her head. The woman dropped to the deck. With the body pushed to the side, Veronica released the lock on the Zephyr's wheel. Before leaving the bridge, the vampire pushed the throttles to full. With a spin of the wheel, she headed aft. The airship started to climb while going into a spin. "Dobbs," the radio called. "Dobbs, why are we spinning?" The radio called.
Kent and Riley dropped first. I never heard the first burst of gunfire. But being on the wrong end of a machine gun became an unforgettable sound.
Murphy and the 8 surviving crewmen huddled close behind an air pump. The ambush happened in the open cargo bay. A spray of bullets bounced around them. The pump was the only cover on the deck. The rattle of 3 machine guns filled the air with hate. Then the gunfire stopped. "Derek," a man called to them. He had a slight German accent. "Derek." "What?" Murphy said. "Do you want to call it a day?" Dressler said. "Fuck off, you Nazi piece of shit." Murphy said. "I have a case of steel hand grenade. We could end this quick," Dressler said. A cat girl stood next to Dressler with a box of stick grenades. Dressler pulled one out to tap it in his palm. "I have one hell of a collection, Derek. Classics. Damn it, fuck. Fine, what do you want us to do?" Murphy said. "Toss the guns over the side," Dressler said. "How do I know you're not going to kill us?" Murphy said. "The entertainment is worth not killing you," Dressler said. The guns went over the side. 3 Tabithas came forward armed with Maschinengewehr 42s, German general-purpose machine guns. The stocky cat girls were strong enough to stand and shoulder fire such weapons. Dressler and Jacqueline followed behind them. The blonde cat girl had a coil of chain with a spiked steel ball on the end. She looked around the pump at Murphy with a smile. Dressler looked over the pump and the damage from the bullets. "Now what?" Murphy said. Jacqueline giggled. "We dump you in the lake with a life raft," Dressler said. "But," Jacqueline said as the Zephyr slammed into the side of the Gneisenau. Zephyr's lower outboard engine fouled on the Gneisenau's envelope. The carbon fiber canvas ripped. A prop spun into a gas cell. The 2 airships locked together with twisted struts and canvas hulls. The airframes twisted with a low wail of bent aluminium. A rush of leaked gas whistled over the wind. Everyone grabbed for something solid as both ships tilted. Murphy started to slide to the edge. Two men closer to what had once been the hull slipped over the side. Jacqueline threw the ball around the pump and grabbed Murphy. The airships tilted with the wind. Murphy and Jacqueline slid down the deck to the edge. Her arm grabbed around his waist and crushed the air from his chest. They slipped over the side. The cat girl held him and the chain as they dangled. Dressler's hand reached down to pull Murphy from the edge. The cat girl scrambled up as the two airships righted. Dressler handed Murphy a roll of duct tape. The deck rolled with the wind. And Murphy felt the butterflies in his stomach as both airships lost altitude. "We need to patch that cell," Dressler said. He looked at Murphy's crew. "Men, start throwing everything overboard. Now!" "Do it," Murphy said. He had seen Dressler's eyes. They had been vibrating to the sides. The super science had activated. "Come on, Derek," Dressler said as he ran to the leak. Dressler grabbed hold of the frames to walk on the edge of the outside of the envelope. He was under the rip. Holding on with one hand, he reached to Murphy. "The tape," Dressler said, reaching out. Murphy peeled off an arm's length of tape.
I should have pushed Dressler off the ship then. But if I did, the cat girls would have killed us. In the end, we sealed the hole. The men lightened the Gneisenau. Dressler got that pump running again. Eventually, with pry bars, we got both ships separated.
Murphy waited in Dressler's cabin. Jacqueline leaned on the desk. She fiddled with the chain and kept her eyes on Murphy. She smiled and twirled her hair with a finger. Her tail was out, a plume of blonde fur. It swished over the desk. Dressler unrolled a blueprint on the desk to make notes of the repairs. "So you make movies?" Jacqueline said. "Documentaries. I'm an explorer, adventurer and a naturalist," Derek said. "You adventure naked?" Jacqueline said. "Naturalist. I study natural history. With clothes on," Derek said. "My way sounds more fun," Jacqueline said. "Might be worth studying," Derek said. Dressler swatted the tail away. With a knock on the door, Tabitha walked in. "Captain, we have a message from the League of Science," Tabitha said. "I don't have time for Papa. There are landings on the East Coast, and they're moving west," Tabitha said. Dressler looked up at her and set his pen down. She never called him Papa publicly. Tabitha handed him the teletype from the League. Murphy saw Dressler's eyes shake. The old man dropped back in his chair, giving Murphy the teletype. "Aliens?" Murphy said as he read and reached for his radio on the desk. The radio clicked on. "Zephyr, is there League traffic?" Murphy said. "Yes, sir. A flash warning, an invasion is underway." "It's all hands, Skipper," the radio said. Dressler rolled up the blueprints. "Tabitha, get Derek back to his ship," Dressler said. "Yes, Captain," Tabitha said. "What are you going to do?" Murphy said. "Make repairs. Long-term Mexico," Dressler said. The door closed as Murphy walked out. The tail swished. Dressler slammed his hand on the desk. Jacqueline scooted off. "You hussy. You were flirting with him," Dressler said. "Maybe a little," Jacqueline said. "A little?" Dressler said. "We've been up here for a long time, Otto." "You have it easy with Veronica," Jacqueline said.
The encounter shook the Zephyr's crew. Dobbs would be out for 2 days. I had lost 5 men boarding Gneisenau. Mark Kent, Malcolm Riley, and Fred Barnes had been shot. Barnes had been on the Zephyr. The vampire shot him when he ran to the helm. Brett Phelps and Chuck Yard had slipped over the side at 10,000 feet during the collision. Yard was a baseline. I'd seen him take a bullet in Burma years ago. He never flinched. The Coast Guard recovered Yard's body a few days later. He had drowned. I knew dealing with Dressler came with a price. We paid that price for nothing. Losing a fourth of my crew was getting off easy. I could see that everyone wanted to go home. But this turned out to be invasion day.
Zephyr drifted with the wind as the crew met in the galley. The weather still held for safe flying. 14 men looked at Murphy. The galley television showed Chicago in chaos. The news from Toledo showed the city in flames, then the signal cut out. Murphy entered the galley kitchen. He grabbed a mug and flipped the coffee tap. Nothing happened. He started to count to 10 to keep from throwing the mug. "Skipper, that vampire emptied the coffee pots," Montgomery said. "As if this day could get any harder," Murphy said. "What are we going to do?" Montgomery said. Murphy set the mug down and walked out to the galley. "Listen up. We're going to Cherry Capital Airport near Traverse City. If anyone wants off, I'll cut you a paycheck. Anyone that stays. We're killing aliens," Murphy said. Zephyr headed south to Traverse City. The large ant creatures overran the town. Murphy thought at first it was atomic ants from the test range. But they had different jaws and eyes. And they don't come this far east. Something about the movement was different that he couldn't explain. Passing overhead, they could see fighting in the streets. Many people held their ground in small groups. Others ran in panic through the streets. The ants bunched up and overwhelmed the resistance. People on the ground waved and begged for rescue. "Fuck this," Murphy said. "They'll be at the airport, might as well fight here." "Skipper." Port side, tall building. The hotel, a lookout called. A bed sheet waved for help with a crowd of people on the rooftop. "We're doing this. Helm hard to port. Take us down to 200 feet, Murphy said. Hard to port. 200 feet, aye. The 10-story Park Place Hotel, tallest building in Traverse City. Aliens had surrounded the hotel. The Zephyr slowed and dropped to the rooftop. "Get ready to take on survivors," Murphy called out. The crew ran to the sides of the gondola. "All shotguns to the port side," Montgomery called out. "Women and children first."
Could we take everyone with the added weight? I had no idea. It didn't matter anymore. We were going to do this. Women and children boarded the Zephyr. Montgomery moved them to the opposite side of the gondola. We had to stay balanced. Montgomery had them throw everything not nailed down out a window.
The airship had attracted more aliens. The swarm climbed the sides of the building. More people in the hotel came running to the roof. As the ants crested the rooftop, the line of shotguns thumped away on the aliens. The buckshot knocked them off as they came over the edge. But it seemed to have no effect killing them. As one ant made it on the roof, the men who had waited rushed forward in panic. They scrambled to get on the Zephyr. No one on the crew could bring themselves to shoot. The line of shotguns broke up as the men forced their way on board. The ship listed from the weight. The Zephyr tipped into the rooftop. She started to sink. "Move forward, other side of the ship," Montgomery said, pushing the survivors down the passageway. "Hold your ground and keep firing," Murphy said. The building shook. Murphy looked over the side to see a bus-sized ant climb the building. He also saw the hull start to bend as the weight of the airship settled on the rooftop. If Zephyr deformed, the ridged frame could collapse. "We need to get the weight off," Murphy said to Montgomery. "Cut off the observation lounge," Montgomery said as he moved the men forward. Murphy ran to a fire locker to find a ceramic power saw. He forced his way through to the back of the lower gondola. "Everyone forward," Murphy said. The survivors didn't move until he cut into the deck beams. Montgomery and some crewmen followed with axes and saws. The swarm crested the roof faster than the shotguns could knock them down. A raven flew past. The giant ant came over the wall and around the Zephyr. It turned to face the airship. The mandibles opened, then shuddered as a harpoon anchored it to the roof. Gneisenau blocked out the sun as she flew over. 6 catgirls jumped out as the airship passed. The rattle of machine guns stopped the aliens. The ant's heavy carapace armor ripped open in green gore. Gneisenau lifted back into the air. The blonde smashed her way through the ants with the ball and chain. Spinning like a dancer with a steel whip. She had something heavy in a backpack. The 6 girls backed up against the Zephyr to step on board. Spent brass and belt links poured out on the rooftop. The blonde handed off the backpack to the vampire in red. Veronica hopped off the Zephyr to the rooftop. With a flint striker, She lit the flamethrower's pilot light. The deck started to twist. Murphy made the last cut. With a snap, the back of the gondola fell away. It pulled a sheet of carbon fiber canvas off. Murphy watched the Zephyr lift from the rooftop. "Oh shit," Murphy said, still on the observation deck. Montgomery's hand stretched out over the side. "Derek!" With a jump, Murphy reached but missed Montgomery's hand. The Zephyr climbed higher. The rooftop burned and Murphy could hear a muffled laugh from the woman in red. The steel ball dropped down to him. Murphy grabbed the chain. He held tight as the Zephyr lifted into the air. Jacqueline and the crew pulled him up to the deck. They ended up in a pile. Montgomery smiled and rolled over, laying down. Murphy sat on the edge of the ruined gondola deck. His legs twitched and ached. Fatigue rolled over him. The blonde catgirl sat down next to Murphy. They watched the flames wash over the aliens. Jacqueline curled a lock of hair around her finger. "Hey Derek," Jacqueline said. "Hey yourself," Murphy said. Her tail flicked his shoulder.
We got to the marina. The Coast Guard station had held. The airport never had a landing. We set down both airships, unloaded our passengers and moored as best we could to wait out the weather. By then, the invasion had ended. Among the men we saved from the hotel, a few lost everything. They asked to join the crew. Montgomery signed them in the logbook. Gneisenau and Zephyr stayed a few days to make repairs. It was rough going. There was a military-issued no-fly order. Everyone was bitter at the Gneisenau over the deaths of our friends. I could only blame myself. We had chased Gneisenau for 3 days and boarded the ship. And then Dressler saved us from being overrun. It didn't balance the scale, but it kept the peace until we could leave. Before we left, I was the only one to go over. I wanted to understand Dressler. To spend time talking with him. I might never have this chance again.
The smell of anise and coffee filled the captain's stateroom. Murphy was glad to have the coffee regardless of how they made it on Gneisenau. "What are you going to do now?" Dressler said. "We'll run Zephyr down to Akron for repairs. You could come with us. There is an amnesty for outlawed super scientists. It looks like there will be a very big war," Murphy said. "No, my sins predate the League and I had my fill of war by the time I left Spain in '38. I'm my own man now and I'll never go back," Dressler said. "That I can understand," Murphy said. "Derek, if there is a war coming, I can behave." "Truce?" Dressler said. "Truce," Murphy said.
He was a lying bastard.
From The Canticle of Progress. The 5th Canticle. Then came the 3rd of the Engine Lords. They worked in flesh, bone, and steel, with secrets hidden on the Ostfront. They are the children of doom, to be vanquished and hounded to the ends of the earth. The end. Text-to-speech audio provided by Narrakeet at narrakeet.com. Audio editing software provided by Audacity at audacityteam.org. Invasion Day stories can be read at loganhousepub.substack.com. Logan House Publishing audio is available on YouTube and loganhousepub.substack.com podcast. Please like, comment and subscribe. Thank you for listening. Copyright 2023. Logan House Publishing. All rights reserved.